So I was inspired by the movie Interstellar again. I made another pad, I called it Stay, and this is what I came up with. And keep in mind, this is only this patch, there's nothing else in the background. So yeah, here we go. All right, so let's get into this here. Now imagine if Michael McConaughey actually stayed the whole time. That would have been wild. That would have been a whole different movie there. So let's go to effects here. Let's turn off the chorus, the delay, the equalizer, and the reverb. Okay, so this patch is kind of a lot going on. We're using all three oscillators and the sample oscillator, so let's turn off those as well. And let's focus on the first one, which is just an init saw wave. Okay, so this one's interesting. We're going to be using the init saw wave like I was saying, but we're going to be using this smear over here. And as you can see, it's by default, there's a little bit of value already at 3.738%, but we're also using this on LFO1, which is kind of just this big triangle shape. So it's kind of just slowly moving at this at 9.675 seconds to be exact. And there's a little bit of stereo at 0.078. 16 voices of unison, and then the detune was brought down from 20 to 13. And that's pretty much it for this oscillator. It's not too crazy, right? So over here on this LFO here, we can always double click this magnifying glass and kind of have a bird's eye view where it actually fits the envelope to the shape here. So this is going to be very important for this type of sound, right? With pads, the envelope is very crucial. So the attack time is going to be, if I just undid that over here, let's see, 2.439 seconds, 0 hold. The decay is going to be 1 second, sustained 0.524, and then the release is going to be 1.411 seconds. So something that I personally like to do in pads is the attack. I don't really like when the curve is kind of concave when it's kind of like scooped up like this. It feels like it's too fast once it gets to the peak there. So I generally always grab this note and kind of push it up a little bit. It seems a little bit smoother to me, but you know, definitely you can try that out for your end, see if you feel the same way. So moving on from there, we have oscillator number 2. Now this one's going to be down 1 octave over here, and we're using the basic shapes, and it's going to be pretty much a square wave, but the frame is going to be 162.7 to be exact. No voices of extra unison or detuning, which doesn't even matter because we have one voice here. And both of those is something kind of like that there. Now just oscillator 2. Now the kind of point for this one here is to really carry the low end right because it's down an octave, but it also just has that interesting kind of dissonant vibe when you hit a couple different notes together. Just got a nice sound to that as well. So moving on from this one here, we're going to oscillator number 3, and this one is going to be the cookie jar. And this one's interesting, so take a listen first. So hopefully you noticed, maybe you didn't, but if you didn't, I have snuck a tiny little ARP in there, or I guess maybe technically a sequence because it hits 2 notes. But anyway, so this is kind of the flavor of the sound. It's kind of like hitting a couple notes, kind of going through the stereo field, and kind of just making it a little bit interesting, right? Because pads, you got to change over time, make things interesting and moving things. And yeah, so basically for this one is going to be the cookie jar, and over here for the frame, it's going to be 148.8. 3 voices of unison, and the detune is 6, so really not too detuned at all. So what's kind of happening here is 2 things, right? So once we play this here, right, it's going to be on this macro, which is going to be this ARP here. So when I hit a note, it kind of lights up here, right? The value is going to be 0.801, which is, like I said, this macro over here. Because if you don't like the ARP, you can totally take it out by just moving the macro up here. So the way this works here, if we go to our pitch here, we have the root note and then 7 semitones up. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, which is going to create a perfect fifth. So it's kind of works with really any key that we're going to be pressing. Obviously, if we stay in key. So if we go over here to the pitch, we can kind of see that this is going to be modulated by random 1, which is this guy down over here, which is going to be sample and hold. And this is going to be tempo sync to 1/8. So the way we need to think about this is we have 2 notes, right? The root and then the fifth. So we play a note. Now we have to tell Vital how many octaves of range do we want to play. So in this case, when we put a modulator on the pitch, we go over here, we right click, and then we go to enter value. And I wanted 2 octaves of space to work with, and that's why I put 24. So if we play a note here, so that's going to be basically picking the root note and the fifth of 2 octave range, if that makes any sort of sense. But wait, there's more. So over here on the panning, I've also dropped the randomness over here. I put the panning to the left kind of here to have this kind of hover around this range here, kind of just the top end of this knob here. So kind of like on a clock 9 and 3, if we still even look at clocks like that nowadays. And the point of this is once the effects kind of come in and makes everything a lot bigger than it normally is, right? It's kind of going to be bouncing these different notes all over the stereo field or most of the stereo field and kind of just make it interesting. Sometimes notes are going to be from the left, from the right, kind of in the center. Who knows really where they're going to happen at. So that's kind of the concept of that. So that one is, I think that's covered all for oscillator number 3. And then we go to the sample engine or sample oscillator, which is just the HVAC unit, which is actually kind of a cool sample because it kind of fills up nice for the stereo field, the whole sound range, and it kind of just, it really glues patches together, especially if you're using filtering and kind of moving things around. It gives you some extra ingredients to work with. So the level over here is going to be at 0.099, not too much really going on here. So yeah, let's talk about our filters here. So let's turn all of these on and they would sound something like this. Okay, so this is kind of an interesting filtering setup, I guess, right? So the first oscillator is going to filter number 1, which is this ladder 12 dB, right? So we play a note here. Let's turn these off for a second here. And what I kind of wanted to do for this one here is this cutoff right here is about 2,463 hertz, but I put this on LFO2 here, and if we go over here, it's basically this triangle shape here, but it's on trigger mode, right? And it's 11.17 seconds, and we hit a note here. So kind of 2 things are happening, right? There's 2 different filter motions. This first one here, once I hit this note, we can kind of see the modulation going up here, right? And if I let go, it's still going to be in the decay or the release phase. However, this LFO is still going, and I kind of wanted that. Once I released the notes, I still wanted to have this filter keep opening once I let go of the keys, and the release phase is also happening. So I wanted that motion to happen. So that's kind of the thought process of this, right? So once this really starts, it's still going and it still has that motion to it. So that's why this one is only going to filter number 1. So it's going to be 11.7 seconds on the trigger mode for LFO number 2, which is the cutoff over here. And the amount's 20.49 dB for the modulation amount, or 20.49, not dB. Anyway, going to filter or oscillator number 2, 3, and the sample, these are all going to filter number 2. So this filter 2 is going to be using the analog 12 dB. And the resonance is about 30.19%, and then the cutoff manually is 893.8 hertz, with a little modulation from envelope number 2, which is this guy, right? So basically, there's 2 filters happening, right? Oscillator 1 is going to filter number 1, doing kind of its own thing, kind of making it separate, so it's not just all controlled by one sound, right? And then oscillator 2, 3, and the sample are going to this second filter. So once I let go of the keys, it kind of snaps back, right? It kind of just closes up the gate, I guess you could call it. So once you hit notes, it's opening it up, and the second we let go, it's kind of moving a little bit faster. And you notice once I let go, as this is closing, the first one is still opening, so it's kind of just giving you a different kind of vibe, right? Because it's hard to tell what's really going on in the filtering sections. And I feel like something like that's kind of nice because you still get that slow swell from the first filter, but the second one, you kind of get that snappy, almost emotional, impactful, dynamic vibe there. So the value for this second envelope here, the attack is going to be 2.439 seconds, no hold. The decay is going to be 1 second, sustain 0.524, and then the release 1.411 seconds. Okay, we have 8 voices here, and then, yeah, that's pretty much all I changed, or I didn't really change it, but I kind of want to point that out here. Because keep in mind, this one can be a little CPU intensive because there's a lot of release tails, there can be a lot of effects going on, and you kind of do want to play a lot of chords, and you know, so it can build up if you have a lot of stuff in your session or something like that. So maybe you might want to dial that down because your CPU could spike as you see all these spikes appear, which is probably because I'm recording as well. But anyway, I thought I'd point that out. So over here on the effects, it's really not too bad. So first thing we do is we hit it with a chorus. We have 4 voices here, the frequency 10.63 seconds, the feedback here is going to be 40, the mix, it looks like it's down, but really it's on macro number 2 at 0.269, so 26%. And depth, we have 50%, delay 1, 1.953 seconds, delay 2, 7.812, the cutoff 60, and the spread 1. And then we have the delay. So this is kind of like what I like doing, right? We have a 8th note over here, and then we have a 1/16 over here, and then it's going to be ping pong. And those are nice too, because those delays really help out that arpeggio that's kind of going, or that sequence technically, whatever you want to call it. Kind of helps that kind of have a little more space of its own. So the feedback here for this delay is going to be 30.45. The mix, obviously again by macro number 2 at 0.330 or 33%. The cutoff is going to be 66.77. The spread 0.338. And then with a pad like this, there's a lot going on, so we kind of do need to EQ it a little bit here. So this first one, I brought, where's the cutoff here? At about 164 hertz, and I took out maybe 5.372 dB. And then over here on the top end, we have a shelf going on, and we're kind of targeting 1,794 hertz, and we're kind of bringing that down by about 2 dBs or so. And then last but not least, every pad pretty much needs some reverb. So here's some reverb. Okay, so low cut, this one's kind of important, especially for a low-end patch like this. We don't really want the low-end stuff to really reverberate because it can get muddy and disgusting. So 216.3 hertz we are cutting out, and for the highs, we're kind of cutting out at 2,071 hertz. Cutoff here is going to be at 8 point something, pretty much almost all the way down. The chorus amount 5, delay 0, mix, it looks like it's 0, but it's really on the second macro, 0.41 or 41%. Then the time, 1.461 seconds. The size, huge, I'm just kidding. Size 59.77, chorus 0.250, gain 0. And that's pretty much this patch in a nutshell. And like I said before, if you're not really a fan, I almost said if you're not fancy for this ARP, that's a weird thing. I never ever say fancy in my life. But anyway, you heard it here first. So you can always take this ARP all the way down. And you can just have a nice little patch like that. So yeah, and there's also the effects. If you want to take those off and use external stuff, you can totally do that too, which is kind of why I like putting a lot of my effects on macros, because it's easier to just turn that off in one go and then use something else. So yeah, or you can dial it back if you don't want too much. If I make it too wet for you, you know what I'm saying? You can always dial that back just a little bit. So with that being said, let's place out with Stay from Inspiration by Interstellar, because man, that's such a good movie. Okay, so here we go. All right, thank you so much for watching. If you'd like to get this patch for free, there's a link in the video description below, and it can be yours. See you in the next one.